At the center of this tragic tale were three individuals: John Reynolds, a former Marine and devoted husband; Emily Reynolds, his loving yet often lonely wife; and Father Mark, a charming and enigmatic priest. Their once ordinary lives became entangled in a web of deceit and tragedy, casting a shadow over the peaceful town of Meadowbrook forever. John and Emily Reynolds appeared to be the perfect couple. Married for over a decade, they had built a life filled with stability and respect. John, a decorated ex-Marine, was admired for his discipline and honesty. Emily, a stay-at-home mother, was cherished for her kindness and active participation in community activities. Their seemingly happy marriage was a cornerstone of their social circle. Yet beneath this idyllic facade, Emily often felt isolated. John's demanding new job as a security consultant for a high-profile firm required him to travel frequently, leaving Emily alone to manage their household and care for their two children. While his prestigious work consumed nearly all his time and energy, Emily's days were filled with longing, her evenings empty without John's presence. She immersed herself in community events and church activities, but the void in her heart only deepened with each passing day. Father Mark, the new priest at St. Mary's Church, quickly became a magnetic figure in the town. His impassioned sermons drew more parishioners each Sunday, and he seemed to possess an uncanny ability to understand the struggles and secrets of those who confided in him, offering solace and guidance. Emily found herself increasingly drawn to his charismatic presence, seeking comfort in his words and companionship. She volunteered more at the church, hoping to fill the emptiness left by John's frequent absences. As John's absences grew longer, Emily's bond with Father Mark intensified. She found in him a confidant, someone who listened without judgment, and their conversations grew more personal, more intimate. However, Father Mark, behind his benevolent exterior, harbored his own secrets and ambitions. He saw Emily's vulnerability as an opportunity to draw her closer. The scandal began with whispers, as all scandals do. Meadowbrook was a small town, and secrets were hard to keep. John, oblivious to the growing closeness between his wife and the priest, remained focused on his demanding job. He took pride in his work, providing security strategies for influential clients, ensuring their safety in a world full of unseen threats. Yet he remained unaware of the greatest threat brewing within his own home. Father Mark's arrival in Meadowbrook as the new parish priest quickly endeared him to the community. His sermons were passionate, his counsel wise, and his presence comforting. He had a unique ability to connect with his parishioners, offering guidance and solace in their times of need. Emily, deeply spiritual and actively involved in the church, was naturally drawn to Father Mark's charisma and warmth. Their affair began innocuously enough. Emily, struggling with feelings of loneliness due to John's frequent absences, sought solace in the church. Father Mark, always approachable, became her confidant. What started as discussions about faith and personal struggles gradually grew more intimate. Emily felt a connection with the priest that she had never felt with anyone else, a sense of being truly understood and valued. Father Mark, captivated by Emily's honesty and vulnerability, found himself drawn to her, not just as a parishioner, but as a woman. Their meetings became more frequent, more private, held in the quiet, hidden corners of the church. The lines between their roles began to blur, and an unspoken tension simmered between them. The forbidden nature of their relationship, a priest falling for a married woman, added a thrilling danger to every stolen glance and quiet conversation. As their relationship deepened, they began to meet outside the church, under the pretense of spiritual guidance. Emily and Father Mark would take long walks in the countryside, their conversations filled with laughter and shared secrets. Their emotional connection quickly turned physical, with lingering touches sparking intense desire. They found themselves in a passionate affair, their bodies entwined in the shadows, hearts racing with the thrill of forbidden love. Each secret meeting was charged with the excitement of crossing sacred lines, making their forbidden love even more intoxicating. As the affair grew more intense, it began to consume their thoughts and actions. They became reckless, meeting in riskier locations and leaving behind subtle clues that hinted at their indiscretions. Emily's behavior began to change noticeably. She became more distant and evasive with John, her once steady demeanor now marked by restlessness and distraction. Father Mark, too, was affected. His sermons took on a more fervent tone, reflecting the turmoil within him. He struggled with his vows and the guilt of his actions, yet he was unable to sever his connection with Emily. The affair provided a sense of excitement and fulfillment that he had never experienced before. John, initially oblivious to the affair, started noticing changes in Emily. Her late nights at the church, the secretive phone calls, and her sudden coldness toward him, all pointed to something amiss. His suspicions grew, and he began to piece together the evidence of Emily's betrayal. His world, once stable and predictable, began to unravel. The community, too, started whispering. Meadowbrook was a small town where everyone knew each other's business, and the subtle changes in Emily and Father Mark did not go unnoticed. Gossip spread like wildfire, and the scandalous nature of their relationship became the subject of hushed conversations and speculative glances. As the affair continued, a darker truth emerged. Father Mark had a history of similar indiscretions. It came to light that Emily was not the only woman he had seduced under the guise of spiritual guidance. Several other women, once drawn to his charm and charisma, came forward with their own stories of secret meetings and illicit affairs. The revelation of Father Mark's multiple affairs cast a sinister light on his relationship with Emily. The priest, once seen as a pillar of the community, was now viewed with suspicion and contempt. The growing danger and desperation in Father Mark's actions became apparent as he sought to maintain his secrets at any cost. In a desperate bid to keep his secrets hidden, Father Mark resorted to something unthinkable. David, a regular churchgoer, caught Father Mark and Emily kissing in the confessional booth. David threatened to expose them unless Father Mark confessed. Terrified of ruining his perfect image, Father Mark devised a dark plan. He lured David to the church's bell tower under the pretense of talking. It was a dark, quiet night, just right for what Father Mark had in mind. The tower was high and out of the way. As they stood by the edge, David grew more insistent, his voice rising with emotion. He didn't notice Father Mark nudging him closer to the edge. In one swift, brutal motion, Father Mark pushed him. David's eyes widened in shock as he lost his balance, his arms flailing for something to grab, but there was nothing. His scream pierced the quiet night, and it seemed like an eternity before his body hit the ground with a sickening thud. Blood pooled around him, his body twisted in unnatural angles. Father Mark looked down from the tower, his heart pounding. Seeing David dead was horrifying but also a relief. His secret was safe. He quickly descended the tower and, ensuring no one was around, he dragged David's lifeless body to a concealed spot in the church's basement, hiding it beneath old, unused church items. His hands trembled, but he maintained a facade of normalcy, acting as though nothing had happened. Father Mark continued to lead masses with a calm and composed demeanor, though the congregation noticed David's absence. Without a body, the mystery remained unsolved. Father Mark comforted his flock, feigning concern while masking his guilt. As time passed, people gradually stopped asking about David. However, Father Mark's internal turmoil never ceased. Every unexpected sound or shadow kept him on edge, a constant reminder of the enormous risk he had taken, one he felt was unavoidable. Unaware of the deadly extent Father Mark had gone to, Emily continued their affair. She noticed a change in him, a darkness that seemed to loom over him, but he brushed off her concerns with a smile. He tried convincing himself that he could move on, burying his guilt alongside David, but the weight of his actions grew heavier by the day. The police investigation eventually stalled. With no leads or suspects, nothing tied Father Mark to the crime. He began to believe he had escaped justice, resuming his life, yet the memory of that fateful night never faded. It haunted his dreams and tainted every waking moment. Though he had silenced David, the torment of his conscience was relentless. Meanwhile, John, whose life had been built on love, trust, and shared dreams with his wife Emily, found himself consumed by suspicion. Emily had become distant, often lost in thought and frequently absent from home. Overcome by doubt, John decided to uncover the truth by following her. One overcast afternoon, his pursuit led him to St. Mary's Church, where he saw Emily entering the sanctuary. Quietly, he slipped inside and hid behind the altar, his heart pounding with anticipation. From his concealed vantage point, John observed Emily with Father Mark. She appeared different, more lively, her face radiating a happiness John hadn't seen in months. Father Mark, known for his charismatic and caring nature, stood closer to her than seemed appropriate, touching her arm in a way that ignited a fiery anger in John. The sight confirmed his worst fears, an affair between his wife and the priest they both trusted. Engulfed by a mix of fury and heartbreak, John could no longer restrain himself. He burst from his hiding spot, startling both Emily and Father Mark. Emily's face turned pale, while Father Mark, usually composed, appeared momentarily unsettled. The confrontation that ensued was fierce and charged with emotion. John's voice, heavy with betrayal, echoed through the church as he accused them, each word laden with the pain of being deceived. "How could you do this to me?" he yelled, his voice breaking. "To us? To our family?" Emily, taken aback and struggling to find the right words, stammered, tears forming in her eyes. "John, it's not what you think," she tried to explain, but her words were weighed down by guilt. Father Mark attempted to intervene, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Please, John, listen. This wasn't supposed to happen. It's more complicated than you think," he pleaded, his voice desperate for John to understand and forgive. But John, consumed by rage, was beyond reasoning. "Complicated? You've betrayed me, betrayed everything we stand for," he shouted, his voice seething with anger, his fists clenched, his body shaking with uncontrollable fury. The air was thick with tension, and the situation spiraled into chaos. Driven by rage, John lunged at Father Mark. The priest, usually peaceful, was forced into a desperate act of self-defense, his frantic eyes scanning the area until they landed on a large, heavy crucifix near the altar. In a moment of sheer instinct, Father Mark grabbed the crucifix. The first swing struck John with a sickening thud, splitting his forehead open and sending blood spraying. John, fueled by fury, charged again, but Father Mark, gripped by terror, swung the crucifix with all his might. Each blow was more brutal than the last. Bones cracked, flesh tore, and blood splattered across the altar as Father Mark struck again and again, the sound of the blows echoing in the church. The final crushing hit shattered John's skull, leaving him lifeless in a pool of blood. The once sacred crucifix now dripped with blood, as Father Mark stood trembling, his hands covered in John's blood and bits of flesh. The floor was slick with crimson, and John's body lay a broken, bloody mess, his face almost unrecognizable, caved in from the force of the blows. The priest, panting, stood over the lifeless body, surrounded by the gruesome aftermath of his desperate fight for survival. The aftermath was harrowing. Emily, having witnessed the shocking spiral into violence, stood frozen, overcome with horror and sorrow. Her life, once brimming with love and future hopes, now lay in ruins. She collapsed beside John's body, her cries filling the haunting silence that followed the tragic encounter. Father Mark, staring down at his blood-stained hands and the body of his former friend, felt the full weight of his actions. Panic overwhelmed him, and he fled, leaving behind a scene of chaos and tragedy. His escape was not just from the physical location but from the crushing guilt and looming consequences of his actions. The quiet night was soon shattered by the flashing red and blue lights of police cars racing through the town's narrow streets. Emily Reynolds, distraught and in shock, had called 911, her voice trembling as she reported the horrific scene. Father Mark, covered in John's blood, fled the scene of his crime, his heart pounding with fear and guilt. The small town, once his sanctuary, now felt like a maze of danger and betrayal. As the first light of dawn touched Meadowbrook, the news of John's murder spread quickly. The police began searching every corridor of the church, and what they found shocked them. In a dark corner of the church, they discovered David's body, horribly twisted from a fatal fall. Now they knew there were two victims, both of whom had met their end at the hands of the same man. This gruesome discovery left no doubt. Father Mark, once a respected figure, was now seen as a monster. The police scoured every part of the church for clues, each hidden spot revealing more about the dark secrets it held. And so, the manhunt began. All units, we have a suspect on the run. Father Mark is considered armed and dangerous. Approach with caution, came the urgent message over the police radio. Father Mark moved through the back alleys and hidden paths of the town, his mind racing for a plan. He knew the police would be closing in soon. His only chance was to reach the dense woods at the edge of town, where he could lose himself and hopefully evade capture. Detective Miller, a seasoned officer with a reputation for relentless pursuit of justice, coordinated the manhunt. She knew every corner of Meadowbrook and used her knowledge to predict Father Mark's movements. Roadblocks were set up at all major exits, and officers combed the streets and surrounding areas. Father Mark's heart pounded as he reached the outskirts of the town, the dense forest looming ahead, offering a glimmer of hope. He glanced back, seeing the distant flicker of police lights and hearing the faint wail of sirens. With a final burst of energy, he plunged into the woods, his mind a whirlwind of fear and desperation. The forest was thick and confusing, the underbrush tugging at his clothes and slowing his progress. He stumbled over roots and rocks, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves made him jump, fearing the approach of the police. The reality of his actions began to weigh heavily on him, his thoughts a chaotic mix of guilt and dread. Detective Miller, with her keen sense of self-preservation, wasn't far behind. She led her team of officers into the forest, their flashlights slicing through the early morning mist. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, blending seamlessly with the tension that hung over the pursuit. What was once a tranquil haven now felt like a snare tightening around Father Mark. "Spread out! He can't have gone far," Miller commanded, her voice steady and resolute. The trail was unmistakable. Broken branches and disturbed foliage marked the way. The dogs, expertly trained for tracking, barked and strained at their leashes, eager to catch their prey. Father Mark, his strength waning, forced himself deeper into the woods. His mind was a chaotic swirl of thoughts: escape, regret, and the horrifying crime he had committed. Emily's face flashed before him, the woman who had unknowingly set this tragic chain of events in motion. The weight of his sins was unbearable, and a dark, desperate thought began to take root in his mind. Could he find a way out, one final escape from justice? Suddenly, the barking of the police dog shattered the quiet, sending a jolt of panic through Father Mark. Time was slipping away. Desperation surged within him as he broke into a frantic sprint, but exhaustion and fear clouded his judgment. He stumbled into a clearing, where the blinding beams of police flashlights greeted him. "Freeze! Put your hands where we can see them!" Detective Miller's voice rang out, firm and commanding. Father Mark, breathless and defeated, slowly raised his blood-stained hands and sank to his knees, the crushing weight of his actions pressing down on him. The officers quickly closed in, securing him in handcuffs. As they led him away, the cold metal biting into his wrists was a tangible reminder of his guilt. In a moment of sheer desperation, Father Mark made a last-ditch attempt to end his torment. While the officers were briefly distracted, he lunged towards a jagged rock, hoping to bring his suffering to an end. But the officers reacted swiftly, pulling him back and tightening their grip on him. His failed suicide attempt only deepened his despair. As the sun fully rose over Meadowbrook, the once peaceful town now bore witness to the dramatic capture of its fallen priest. Father Mark was taken away, his fate sealed by his own dark deeds. The manhunt had ended, but the scars left on the community would linger for years. Father Mark was swiftly taken into custody, his mind a fog of regret and despair. The trial was brief, the evidence against him overwhelming. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he sat in his cell, the reality of his situation began to sink in. The iron bars and concrete walls were constant reminders of the life he had destroyed. In prison, Father Mark faced the torment of his conscience daily. His attempts at seeking redemption were met with the harsh truth of his actions. The whispers of other inmates, the crushing isolation, and the knowledge of the pain he had caused weighed heavily on him. He had tried to escape justice, but now he would spend the rest of his life confronting it. Meanwhile, the community of Meadowbrook slowly began the process of healing, though the memory of Father Mark's betrayal and the tragic events that ensued remained etched in their collective consciousness. The church, once a sanctuary of peace, now stood as a somber reminder of the darkness that had briefly engulfed their town. And so, Father Mark served his life sentence, haunted by the ghosts of his past. His failed escape attempt was a constant reminder of his inescapable guilt. Could John have ever imagined the depth of betrayal that awaited him? Was Emily's search for solace destined to end in tragedy? And what of Father Mark, whose dark secrets and desperate actions tore a community apart? How will Meadowbrook ever heal from such profound devastation? Thank you for joining us in uncovering this harrowing tale. Click here for another true crime story.